Welcome, everybody, to the Coach Brew podcast. We are talking about experiences in this episode. I wish I could remember the episode number. I don't know. I do know that it is brought to you by chinupchestout.com, which is my clothing brand. Fall collection dropped recently. At the time of this recording, we are about to release our winter collection. You can go to chinupchestout.com and check that out. More importantly, today's episode features a very special guest. I know we rarely do this. It's usually a monologue. It's usually just me driving in my truck, giving you 15, 20 minutes of wisdom. I use that term very loosely. But today we have a guest. His official title is my brother from another mother. We have Billy Colston, who is, he identifies, his pronouns are His Royal Majesty. And he identifies, and if you've ever been to his office, you've seen the plate on the door, his business cards, it does say His Royal Majesty. But technically speaking, he is the GM of RTC. He's the general manager of the Riviera Telephone Company. Now, that is in Riviera, Texas, which is spelled Riviera. I still haven't wrapped my mind around this, but it's pronounced Riviera. Billy will explain that to everyone. But the reason that we brought him on, besides his charm, intellect, and good looks, is because I had the opportunity to visit with his team during my book tour of South Texas. And I got to hear about how they're really transforming what they're doing at the phone company. And they're going from being a service provider to becoming more of an experience company. And I think there's a lot of savvy and wisdom in that. We're going to unpack that with Billy. And without further ado, I present you with His Royal Majesty, Billy Colston. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me. It did take you a lot longer to get to charm, good looks, and intellect than I would have preferred. But we'll kind of work through that. Maybe we can hack our way out of this paper sack that we've gotten ourselves into.
Well, I think anytime someone uses hack and my podcast in the same sentence, they're on the right track. So
well, I like where we're going with this.
I mean, I'm usually referred to as a no talent hack, but we'll
just
work our way through that too.
Yeah. I think we're in minute 2 right now, so just give it time. Yeah.
So Billy, it was fabulous to visit with you and your team.
Well,
and I came away very impressed with the engagement, the quality of their ideas, how they're very much on the same page as a team, but also kind of have their own flavor or their own spin to how they envision things moving forward. And before we dive into all that, give us kind of the backstory on the Riviera Telephone Company as it was, a phone company back in the day, and just sort of kind of give us the timeline leading up to now.
Okay, I'll have to go quick. So you've got me kind of wanting to do the story of why it's Riviera and not Riviera justice.
Let's do that first.
So I don't want everybody to be just sitting there waiting on bated breath to like what is the answer to this question. So during the settling of the town back in the early 1900s, the original land prospector was a gentleman named Theodore Cope from the Midwest and Chicago, somewhere in Illinois. And the vision that he had was to create this Riviera-like destination in South Texas.
The Redneck Riviera, if you will.
The Redneck Riviera, correct. Well, actually, I think that one goes more bayous, but that's a whole nother podcast, right? But he tried to go with where we want to recreate the French Riviera, but in Texas. So that's where it started. Now, as the proximity to the Mexican border goes, we actually are situated about 90 miles from the Mexican border, and there is a surname in the Hispanic culture of Rivera, Rivera. So when the whole resort town thing didn't work out because 3 hurricanes and a fire in 4 years has a tendency to take beach resorts, crumple them up, and throw them away in the floorboard of your truck. It did that very thing. So we ended up with a lot of farming in this community, and that brought in a lot of migrant farmers. Ergo, we had a lot of Mexico influence into South Texas, immigrant influence. So Riviera magically transformed into Riviera.
Like Geraldo.
Like Geraldo, right?
Excellent.
And much like Geraldo, during the Al Capone's bank vault thing, the resort deal didn't quite work out the way that it was planned. So then we decided, you know what, we're going to stick with Riviera because one of these days there's a journalist that's going to go digging for Al Capone's vault, and that's also not going to work out.
Bingo.
So you tie those little points of string together, and there we go.
So for everyone trying to kind of use their mind, wrap their mind around exactly where in Texas, South Texas, Riviera is. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're about 45 minutes south along the coast from Corpus Christi, Kingsville.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Corpus Christi, not Kingsville.
Okay.
So yeah, as the coast, what the typically is the best way to explain it is we sit on the coast as it makes a cute little curvy sea looking thing on the Texas Gulf Coast between Brownsville, which is an international port of entry, and Corpus Christi. If you were to travel up the coast, we're about equidistant between Corpus Christi and Brownsville. Probably faded a little bit more towards Corpus Christi, but if I start having to go into kilometers on that, it gets confusing. So yeah,
we won't go into like that or GPS.
We're not going to
anything.
No,
but what I will say is during my visit down there, everyone, I fell in love with the area. It's beautiful. I think it's a well-kept secret. They probably want to keep it that way, much like we up here in Maine don't want people visiting because they might fall in love and move here. Riviera is very much the same way. Really hospitable, friendly, charming people, beautiful scenery. It's right on the water. Like you can't beat it where you're located, and just the quality of life, country living. Now that brings me to a whole other subject in regards to like location, country living, phone company, how
Right.
that came to be when the town came to be, and your sort of company's footprint in the surrounding area, Billy.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that as we dive into this.
Okay, cool. So great segue, because I like how we just established where we are. Now we're going to do the what we are. So in the first third of the 20th century, my great grandmother, Irma, was a migrant farmer and was considered the fastest box builder in the West. They used to build the crates out of wood. And this woman could whoop together a box. And I don't know that she was that legendary. When she told the story, she was legendary. And since she was the only one there, she got to tell it that she was legendary. So she was a migrant farmer, vegetable packing, handling. And she and her family, parents, siblings, would travel around and follow the crops coming out of the ground. Because obviously those follow the seasons, they follow the weather. So everywhere from kind of the upper Gulf Coast over to Central Texas and then back down to South Texas, they would make a circuit. And so great grandma ended up in Riviera in this vegetable growing agricultural commerce region and met my great grandfather. They got married. They opened a butcher shop, and long and short, they bought the phone company exchange from the guy that owned the hardware store. And they owned and operated that together until the extramarital stuff that my great grandfather was involved in required his belongings to be placed on the front lawn and for her to kick him out. And so she ran it as a single mom during the Depression era and kind of
This is the most diplomatic description I have ever heard for that scenario.
You like that? Yeah, man. Yeah. So,
I hope everyone followed that. That is so diplomatic.
Yeah. So one of those, you always hear the expression, I wish I was a fly on the wall. I wish they had GoPro cameras back then, because the story that I have is like, wow, this is an incredibly unfortunate situation that my great grandfather was in. And she made her impression because, and he passed before I was born, but I mean, he didn't get to stop running until he got to pretty much East Texas.
Wow.
So there was a good 6.5 hours, and we're talking 6.5 hours of 2022 drive time. It took a lot longer back in the 30s and 40s, right? So great grandma ran the thing by herself as a single mom, and through the 40s and into the early 50s, she got remarried. Well, long and short, it was a telephone exchange. John, you when you were in the office, you saw the switchboard that she used to operate. It's on display. This thing's a great big wooden box, and I'm sure everybody's at least seen them in old retro, where you pull the cord and you stick it in and connect the calls, and there's the big speaker and microphone thing. But great grandma used to run that out of her home on the very site where our office currently resides. So that poor little switchboard has lived a long life, and it's moved from when it started until its current resting place. It's moved, the best we can tell by what we've done, maybe about 30 feet from where it started. So
that explains why it's still in phenomenal shape.
Right, it didn't have to travel that much.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you pack your couch and you have to move 4 times, it's all broke up. So that's another good point. Yes. So the telephone company has been in this family since 1937, and it's good that you kind of point out that it's a telephone company, is what it was in the 70s, and it's what it still says on my shirt and my business card. The reality of it is, as the market has changed, there's a whole new emerging group of users of communications devices, whether that be, their wireless, handheld, laptops, computers, tablets. I say computers, but effectively, who doesn't have a smartphone? So our job, as we're still a telephone company, we still identify as a telephone company. There's a lot more to it than, we don't sit around waiting for please phone ring so that somebody will order another rotary phone to go into the kitchen. Because quite honestly, that's still the technology that got us to where we're at, but communications has taken on a whole new role. So
Well, you can never have too many rotary telephones in your kitchen, Billy.
You would think that, but because I don't know, some people would say pack rats. You want to talk about a diplomatic description. Some people call it hoarders, some people call it pack rats. I've got crates and crates and crates of powder blue and avocado green and goldenrod rotary phones that somebody said long ago, somebody older and deader than me said, don't get rid of those. They're going to be worth something one of these days. And I apparently caught the bug, and I as well can't get rid of rotary phones because there's still crates of them stored in a warehouse. It's kind of like in the Indiana Jones warehouse where they put the Ark. Imagine that, but with cardboard boxes instead of wooden crates.
And someone blows the dust off of them and discovers them.
That's it. So we're thinking that hopefully one of these days somebody's like, oh my God, here they are. Right? We've been looking. There's maps. But so coming from the old model, which is we are a monopoly. If you want to get a phone 30, 40 years ago, we're the only game in town. So that mentality that was bred into a lot of us that have been in this industry and in myself, I've been here full time, 23, 24 years now. That being bred into you from growing up in this, you're a monopoly. You have to be a responsible business was the mantra back then, right? You have a duty to keep their phone lines connected. Somebody could have to call the fire department or the ambulance or the police. So that's your duty. That was your motivation, was that you are a utility and you have this responsibility to be good stewards, because if you don't, the Utilities Commission will say, hey, you need to do your job better. But at the end of the day, that was the intrinsic value in this, is that, man, look at this responsibility that we have in our hands. It wasn't generation of income. It wasn't, make the stock price higher. It was make the customers happy through doing exactly what was laid out for you. And there was a script. It said, this is what you'll do. This is how much you'll charge to do it. And I don't quite go back so far as pre-extensions, and extensions being for you younger crowd that follows Sean. Used to be the phone company owned the cable that went to your house, the wire that went to your phone, and your phone. And that was just the way that it was. So if there was something wrong with your phone, you call the phone company and we would come and repair or replace your phone. Deregulation came in and we were able to say, oh my gosh, look at this. We can not only have a phone in the kitchen or in the hallway, you know, those old houses with that little cove that nobody knows what it's for. That was where the phone was. It was in the middle of the house.
Yep.
A, so you could hear it. B, so everybody didn't have to run so far. And then we became put a phone in the kitchen, put a phone in the living room, put a phone in the bathroom, put a phone in the laundry room. And growing up in this business, I never knew any different. Like, yeah, there's phones everywhere. So sorry, I ramble a little bit.
I want to go back to something you mentioned. Basically, you reported to the Utilities Commission, and you had to keep the customer happy to kind of keep the Utilities Commission at bay. Not you personally, but like every phone company at that point in time.
Right.
Which begs the question of who's your real customer?
Exactly.
Yeah, the Utility Commission, really.
Exactly.
Not, Bob and Sally who live, at 123 Main Street on the corner there and have a phone line in their house.
Yep.
And that dynamic has all changed. And, as we kind of fast forward to, I think this is what's surprised me was, you talk about like cord cutting in the household from cable.
Mm-hmm.
We cord cut from cable before we got rid of our landline.
Yes.
Before we ever cord cut from our cell phone, or from our physical landline in our house.
Right.
Which kind of amazed me looking back.
Yeah.
But there's simultaneously you're dealing with two different types of cord cutting, and you're trying to navigate all that, and you have kind of this. It's probably ingrained in the DNA of a company like yours, where you're the only show in town, you're a monopoly, you are a utility that people absolutely need. Well, they have to come to you.
Yes.
How much do you have to woo them, cater to them, provide exceptional service? Because, they could have wandering eyes, but those eyes can't wander anywhere else. They can have one foot out the door, but the alternative to using you was like Morse code, smoke signals, maybe. I don't know. Like
pretty much. So let me ask you a question though.
You had to unwind all that, right?
Absolutely. So let me just ask you a real quick question. I know it's not my podcast. You're supposed to be asking the questions here, but
I love it. You're going to turn the tables on the whole interview. This is going to be like that scene in Step Brothers where they're wearing the tuxedos.
That's it.
And they go for the job interview.
That's it.
We're going to interview now.
Yeah, exactly. Do you deserve me as your interviewee? So you mentioned that you cut the cord with cable. Did you guys just sit down and have a family meeting and say, okay, we are going to stop watching stuff on TV. We're cutting the cord to cable, or did you find an alternative?
We realized that we're paying more for all this stuff, all these channels that nobody in our house watched. Like, what do we really watch? My kids, their idea of TV is watching something on their iPad or their phone. That's what they call watching TV.
Sure.
And they're not alone in that regard.
No.
My wife doesn't watch much TV, so it didn't matter if we cut the cord to her. The only thing I cared about being able to maintain was I'm a huge college football fan, and I love just being able to watch college football on Saturday afternoons.
There you go.
So we just upgraded our internet, which we were already paying for, and we got YouTube TV.
Right. So to my point, and where it's germane to me in this monopoly environment that I'm in, is if they're going to cut away from Riviera Telephone Company, from our service, from our internet service or our telephone service, are they going to find another way to do so? Are they gonna? Because look, I don't know if the listeners know, but the smartphones, there's a lot of different things that it does. It's kind of like the guy that had the watch that told the barometric pressure and there was a compass in it and it told you your heart rate and all of this other, like, what time is it? I don't know. Right. Because it's just so packed with different features. So I'm really, just as a segue, I'm really glad that whenever I said, did y'all sit down and have a meeting and say, we're not doing it? Because I didn't know if you did that or not. So if you decided, you know what, I really want to pull from some of the Amish roots that I grew up around in Pennsylvania, and we just decided that would have taken a completely different turn to this conversation. And I would have been kind of stuck here with my pants down. So thank you for playing into where you knew I was going. That said, there's got to be another option out there for your customers, for your clients. And that's what we have to always be prepared for, is if you're going to cut away from us, from our service, can you get internet from your smartphone? Yes, you can. But what can we do? What can we do to make that customer experience a better one, to where you don't want to put your eggs all in that basket? So that's been our challenge.
And, that's been your opportunity too, because as you guys evolve, like, we've gone from really being like, our economy has morphed into several different things. We used to produce things, then we imported things, then it became, less of a product society and more of a service oriented society. And now I think we've gotten away from, services, and people are moving to wanting experiences. We talked before the show started, like, millennials and Gen Z value experiences over products. They're going to spend their disposable income on experiences, whether that's traveling somewhere or just things they enjoy locally. They'll do that over, buying a nice sports car, or, upgrading things in terms of where they live and what have you, clothing, whatever it is. But you have such an opportunity there to really build a moat around your business, as I like to say, through the experience and the service you provide. And I'm just curious, as you've had to really evolve, evolve or perish, as they say, in business. How have you made that transition and gotten people who work there to think differently about, like, people aren't, there's no requirement to use our utility.
Right. Mostly I've gone with a combination of brainwashing and threats of physical harm that works the best. No, I'm kidding. So the biggest challenge that we have when we onboard, when we have new employees, and when you were here a couple of weeks ago, I think I shared with you that, some of the pleasant surprises that came from that short session is one of the most vocal that we had in there had been at the company for 4 days. And
is that Rick or James, or Rick James?
It was not Rick James. It was Randy that was sitting right next to Rick James. I think he was in Rick James' group, or right next to Rick James' group. But the kid had been there for 4 days, and I guess he just thought, hey, we're supposed to participate. And we're supposed to, because usually when we have one of these get-togethers, unless we start sprinkling alcohol on the crowd, people are pretty confined and to themselves. So,
that was the Coach Brew experience. You got to witness me bringing out the best in everyone.
And I tell you,
the great humanitarian that I am, Billy.
It's not even something that can be learned. It's more of something that's an innate quality in you, that just these people that three of them were mutes before you showed up, and here we are, and they're can't shut them up now. So how did we bridge that, and how we had to kind of work that Rubik's Cube is, at least for me personally, was to make them part of the solution and to get them invested in the reward in this. Now, you can sit there and all day long thank them every day. It's like the kindergarten teacher who's really bucking the system because of the way that the world has turned, and they say, don't have physical contact with the kids, give them a high five in the air across the room. You've got those teachers that, no, I'm going to hug these children because they need to feel love, right? Okay, and those are the teachers that you want on your team, who are going to say, okay, tell you what, give me an opportunity to prove you wrong. I'm going to get positive results out of this. So getting our team invested in this is the solution. This is the path that we all want to go. And this is why this path is going to be good. And collectively, after you please a customer, now you've got a customer for life. Now
Yep.
you've got somebody that's going to be so incredibly loyal to, they'll follow you into the pits of hell. Because when you have a problem, invariably, this is the problem with the internet, John. And in case some of your listeners don't know, sometimes things break. When you've got an infinitely, unattainably, uncountable number of connections that make the internet, sometimes all of those moving parts are not working at the same time. As
Yep.
many fail safes, as many backups, as many backup systems as we've built into this thing over the years that it's evolved into this, the version of it that it is now, sometimes things break. And sometimes
when you make a mistake, you have an
absolutely.
opportunity to fix something that
Yes.
actually cements even more customer loyalty.
Absolutely. And so
Strangely.
that
Yeah.
was the second part of that, is that sometimes things break and sometimes you get lucky and it's somebody else's fault. Most of the time when somebody pushes commit or pushes yes, do this, maybe a step before, and they route something wrong and the whole entire internet stops working, then you have to unpack that. If you've built that relationship here on the back end, it makes it so much easier to go back to them with your hat in your hand and say, we had a problem with the system. We had a problem with the network. We are working on it. And when you can build that trust and they know, oh, y'all are working on it, you know about it. Okay, cool. They'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
They won't call the PUC. They won't complain against, well, this thing's always broken. You have that open line of communication with them. So, and I'm answering your question about how did you get your team to that point? And I think that the simple and the short answer is, do I involve them in every single solution that we need to find? No, I don't go and ask somebody in customer service what their peer over in the technician wing should get for a raise. We don't probably take it that far, but we want to know, what do we need to do? What does management need to do from management level to make your world easier, to make your job easier? Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Like you said to the staff, put yourself on the front row. You're in the cheap seats, bring yourself to that front row.
Yep.
That's, in my opinion, that's the only way that you can get people to buy into this, is you have to make them feel heard. You have to make them feel seen from building your team. And I've got a, whenever I do staffing here, John, I've got a real bad habit of being as discouraging as I can with prospective employees. Like, I know you want to work here because you put in a job application, but let me tell you what it's really like. This is not the easiest place in the world to work. I have an extremely high, almost unattainable expectation for myself, and that translates to the people that I work with.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're honest with your people up front, look, I'm gonna want the best out of you, and I'm gonna want your full potential, and I want nothing short of your full potential. And I think that being kind of transparent with your team is a huge benefit.
And your customers deserve that.
I think that they expect it.
Yeah.
And I think that if your mind's in the right place, they absolutely deserve it. And again, that's been our mantra, is no, they 100% do deserve it. They have to be treated like they're important.
So you don't need to name names, but to give the audience some perspective, you went from not having any competition, essentially having a monopoly,
Yes, sir,
to having, how many different competitors in your industry, in your market, that all of a sudden you guys now have to contend with.
And again, that's a loaded question, depending on, is it just any way to communicate? Are we talking internet? Are we talking
phone, internet, cable?
So full picnic basket. There are currently, in a community with about 700 people in town, there are 11 other options that you can go to get phone and internet, other than Riviera Telephone Company.
I think that's important for people to hear, not just to give them some context about why you're so passionate about moving from this being a transaction to an experience for customers,
Yes.
but also because there are a lot of other people
Yeah.
who, let's say they're business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they've got as many vendors they're competing against in their industry, in their market. and they're trying to figure out, how can I do it differently? How can I do it better?
Right.
And that kind of leads me to my next question is, how are you doing it differently, and how are you doing it better? Because when you have that much competition, you can't run a profitable business that's sustainable purely on price alone.
You're
And
100% right.
you have to find a way to do it better,
Yes.
so that price, you do not become commoditized, and it doesn't go to, quote, the lowest bidder, so to speak,
Right.
every time.
Right. So there's two things that you touched on there that I absolutely love it when it comes up. Are you the lowest bidder? And it is law here at this organization that I don't ever want to get the bid because we're the lowest bidder.
Yep.
Now, incidentally, we might be, just because if it's if it's a business down the road and the next closest person, physically located closest person, is in San Antonio, then travel time is going to chew into, you still got to pay those technicians the same amount.
Yep.
We clients want a discount when it's just travel time, but employees are not willing to voluntarily say, hey, I'm not really doing anything, so can you just pay me a third of what you're going to pay me, because that seems fair. So it may incidentally mean that we get it because we're the lowest bidder, but I'm not trimming things, and I'm more than certainly not going to sacrifice quality to get the job and try to be the low bid. There's plenty of people out there in the market that are doing that, and that's their business model, and more power to them. If that's their business model and they can make it work, then I wish them all the success in the world. So the second, and I kind of went backwards, but the second part of what you said, how do you differentiate, and how do you become the carrier of choice? There's a term in our industry, we're the carrier of last resort. So when we go in with the utilities commission under universal service, if John, if you and your family live at the end of a 1 mile long county road, private road, and you're the only one out there, then it's going to cost you the same exact amount to get universally provided service as it is for the guy that lives the next block away from my central office. It may cost me more to put that in there, but that's how we equalize this. That's why we have things like the USDA involved, because they understand the country a little bit better. So all of that said, how do we differentiate our service from those services of the competitors? And it was kind of what you said when you did the intro. It is creating that customer experience. It's creating and differentiating our business from what the next guy would do. Because plenty of people will come down and sell you internet. Elon Musk will send you the stuff. I know we weren't going to mention names, but everybody knows that Starlink is, I mean, they're mailing stuff to people left and right. Yep. And they're having a lot of success with it. Just for fun, I tried calling Starlink and I asked to speak with Elon. Wasn't available. Couldn't get through. And this is actually true. It was difficult to navigate and try to find a person, as it is in most large businesses. Again, do I fault them for that? No, they have access to millions of clients. It's been vowed by my predecessors, and I've been very blessed to be able to keep the tradition alive. When you call our business, you're going to talk to a live person, unless it's after business hours, because that does get old when the phone rings at your house.
Yeah,
because that was actually the case for a while. But that said, we try to retain and maintain that personal touch. And one of the things, and kind of prep for this, one of the stories that you liked, which I like it too, mostly because it's not my story. I just get to recount it on behalf of my staff. So in this hamlet in South Texas, we're surrounded by a lot of ranch and farmland. Some of that ranch land is used for just running cattle, agricultural purposes, but the high-end hunting lease market, where we have clients that'll come in and lease up 25,000 acre pastures to hunt white-tailed deer, nilgai, different animals. We had a camp that was in our service area. We provided internet access and telephones to. And in conversations, one of our staff members was there making a repair, and a throwaway comment was made by the camp manager and the camp owner. Said, man, do we have to get another TV? because every year they want to watch college football out at the hunting camp over New Year's because we got all the bowl games right stacked up, and they come down for like 2 weeks. Outdoor pavilion, and about every 6 months and again, just for perspective, we're located. Oh gosh, this camp was probably 6 or 7 miles from the intercoastal waterway. So salt air, it corrodes plastic down here. I mean, it's horrible. So these guys were talking like every 6 months, we got to go to Walmart and get another TV. So guys heard it over and it's like, do you guys need any help with that? It's like, oh, it's nothing that y'all can help with. It's just, we got to go get another TV. Well, one of the guys that was on site, one of our employees said, do you want us to find you a TV that you don't have to replace? And he said, what are you talking about? So they unpack all this. Well, they make outdoor grade TVs. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So on the way back from the site, the guy gets on the phone with me and says, hey, this client wants a TV, but he wants an outdoor TV. And I said, find it. And I said, get him a quote on it. He said, he didn't even want a quote. He just wants an outdoor grade TV and he wants it to work. And he wants it to work for more than 6 months. And I said, then stand by it. And if it breaks, get one with a 3-year warranty, and we'll warranty it for a year, and we'll handle the moving it back and forth. So to make the long story short, which I'm terrible at, the guys come in, they order a TV, and we've got a green light from client. I don't care what it costs, which are the words that you want to hear when you're a service provider. I don't care what it costs. Cool. Which means it does really play on your honesty, because you have to say, well, okay, so it's going to be 25,000. I mean, you got to be within reason. So guys came in, we did a straight across the board, what would have marked everything up. And oh, here's the kicker. This was on a Monday. Bowl games start up on Friday. So the TV has to be purchased, sent to Las Vegas, coated with this special, they didn't tell me what was on it because then I would have started doing it, put back together and shipped. So from Monday afternoon, the thing gets shipped over there. It's coated. It's ready to ship. They overnight it to us. The installation and repair crew was standing outside of the office waiting on UPS. UPS showed up at 3 minutes after 4. We rocket a guy down to the gate. By 5:20, the guy's TV is on. It's hooked up. They're watching their football. And here's the moral of the story, right? So they got their experience. They got their football. 2 years later, the guy decides to get off of the lease. He wasn't going to renew for another 10 years or whatever it was. They had put in and I didn't see the invoices. I'm going to guess they had built buildings. They had put in walk-in coolers. All of that was required to stay, I guess, per their lease agreement. They took to their clothes. They left their buildings, and they took a waterproof TV was the only thing they took away from them. That one was one of those wins that we had. And I think we even said, look, this is a super huge number. Let's just mark it up 25%. I mean, we're just handling parts here. We'll do straight labor, T&E on that, but we're not going to hit them for, regular retail 60% markup. That guy moved on, got onto another camp that was just outside of our service area. And we literally had to reverse auction negotiate with the poor guy. He wanted us so bad to come over and provide service to him in the next territory. We're like, we can't go that far. Our service doesn't go that far. Well, what will it take for you to plow cable? I mean, no, you're missing the point here. So that kind of thing is the very long way to say, you have a couple of those experiences with your customers. Now that creates an experience for your staff and for your employees because they get the win.
They get to be the hero.
They get to be the hero, right? So they get to experience that intrinsic value of, did they get paid the exact same money had they heard that conversation, got back in their truck, came back home, and would have never done anything about it? Absolutely, they would have. But guess what they got? They got the win, and they won that guy for life.
Yep.
And that's what companies like us, that's what we have to do. We employ a total of 18 people from the top to the bottom. That's our head count here. And we serve about 1,600 customers, all in, all done. So every single one of those has to be meaningful customers. We have to get them to call us and say, hey, there's something going on with my TV. Well, we're not TV repair guys. but if it's an internet problem, I can sure fix that for you. So does that
Absolutely.
mean sometimes you walk them through stuff that's outside of your scope? Absolutely. But what it means is you win these people for life and you provide that kind of experience for them that they won't forget.
And I love the example of the waterproof TV, because that's just such a it's such a big win. Um, and if you can create a win that big just by kind of having your radar on and your antenna up, listening for like, how do we help a client solve a
Right.
problem?
Right.
You can create a much smaller version of that with relative ease
Absolutely.
for many, many, many more clients, and then be able to replicate that, across the board. And that is it's really a story of great companies. Billy is,
Yeah.
the Ritz Carlton experience
Yeah.
was built on the backbone of doing something just like that. Walt Disney, who
Yeah.
everyone thought was absolutely off his rocker,
Mhm.
built an experience company.
That's exactly right.
And
Starbucks is another one that, man, you really don't know what crowd you're going to get into, because I actually got booed and hissed at a seminar I was at. And I was just quoting a guy. I even cited the guy. He was in the room that had this conversation with me. He said, the coffee at Starbucks isn't all that great,
no,
right? Well, see, now that was not a popular opinion there, because there's people that really, really love Starbucks. But if you dig into it, do you really love the coffee at Starbucks, or do you love the experience at Starbucks? Is it the barista with the nose ring and the purple hair and the dude that's always in there on a laptop that's dressed in kind of semi-professional business attire? I'm fairly sure works for Starbucks, that they just have that guy hanging out in these lounges, but the music, the smell of the place, the $17 coffee cup that you've only seen in that one Starbucks, it does things to people, and it really makes them want to spend $17 on a coffee mug. And I actually, when we talked about doing this, John, Walt Disney is one of those. I've only been to Walt Disney World one time whenever I was a kid, and then it was brought up to me how that illusion and that experience and that magic happens. And somebody asked me one time, have you ever seen him change a light bulb or dump the trash at Walt Disney World? And I was like, what? I mean, you almost have to have seen that, but you don't see that. You don't see the stuff that they don't want you to see, right? So they're
exactly.
going to put this screen, and you're right. Did Walt Disney catch a lot of flack for it? Because what are you thinking? You're gonna lose everything. But he gained so much by the model.
And you bring up a great point. You don't see the things they don't want you to see. They also make sure you always see the things they do want you to see.
Yes.
And one of my favorite stories about that, Billy, is, so if you're listening to this and you've ever been to the animal kingdom, you always, during your tour of the animal kingdom, you will always see the lion sunbathing out in that field on this big rock.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how cold it is out, and it doesn't matter how hot it is out on any given day. He is always out there sunbathing on that rock. Is it a real lion? It absolutely is a real lion. This is not like theater. They haven't like artificially reproduced, created some robot lion. But what they did was they made a climate controlled rock.
Yep.
So that when it's cold out, that rock's the only warm thing he gets to lay on.
Absolutely.
When it's hot out, that rock is the only cool thing that he gets to sunbathe, to relax and sunbathe on. So he always wants to be on that rock, and it's in the most visible place along the tour.
Yeah.
Like, they leave no stone unturned, and the point of that story for everyone is you got your own version of that in your business, just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely.
How do you make sure they see the things you want them to see, and they
Yes.
don't see, all the warts and the blemishes and things you don't want them to see?
Absolutely. And I think that's the responsibility of any leadership team in any business, is to create, and it's not deceptive to create that illusion, but you have to, I mean, you have to put your best foot forward. So does everyone have some clutter? Sure. Everyone has some clutter, put it somewhere that's not going to be in view of the people that come in. And if your installation and repair crew opens the back door of the truck and a bunch of stuff spills out because they look disorganized, what level of trust are you going to have for that person to come into your house and not break the china in the china cabinet when he's trying to get to where the internet plugs into the wall? So all of those things matter. And what's interesting is that for those people that are in leadership, the challenge of trying to explain to a 5-week employee or a 36-year employee why it's important for you to keep your workspace tidy, why it's important for your shirt to be tucked in, why it's important for you to be groomed, why it's important for you not to go into a customer's house with white carpet, white walls, white ceilings, and white everything with mud on you. You want to instill that confidence in them from that first impression's all you get. So sometimes, and you don't want to be that manager that said, because I said so. You want to explain to them, because everything that you do from when you experience that customer by knocking on their door until you say farewell, every bit of that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could always tell. It's the old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. Excellence in small things is excellence in all things. I could always tell, like, if we were going to be playing a really disciplined team when I was coaching, I was a college coach,
right?
How they would line up for the national anthem.
Yep.
Were they all in a row? Did every single one of them have their helmet tucked underneath their left arm? Were they all standing there with their feet together at attention, facing the flag, like along the sideline? Or do they look like just a ragtag band of gypsies who were just kind of in a pile on their side of the field?
Yep.
You could tell so much from these little touch points.
Absolutely, because that discipline is going to translate into, if they're disciplined standing there and standing at attention for the Pledge of Allegiance or for the national anthem, what are their practices like?
Yep.
Because I guarantee
they don't commit a lot of penalties too.
Exactly. That well-disciplined team is going to be a well-coached team and is going to perform at a higher level in general than the guys that are standing there and talking to each other and John and I 100% agree with that.
And to your point, like, I'm just thinking back about, like, how contractors have, like, come into my house.
Yeah.
And like what their trucks look like. I've only ever hired one firm who actually put foot coverings on their shoes before they set foot in my home.
Yep.
You think about all the electricians, plumbers, painters, general contractors, appliance delivery people, like cabinet people, you name it, handyman, all the different people that have come into your home. How many of them have ever, like, been very intentional about making sure they put foot coverings on?
Right.
For me, over the many years of owning several houses, one.
Yep.
Ask me if I still do business with that company today. Absolutely.
If you can, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And they're one of the first ones I recommend. But it's finding those little things that, like, they become a competitive advantage, because people, like I'm telling that story, will tell that story about your company as you're listening to this.
Absolutely.
It's I just think it's everyone looks for an advantage with price. Everyone looks for an advantage, in all these obvious places where you can't necessarily create that advantage. Well, anyone can create more loyalty and create more, more advantageous or a greater market share through experience.
I agree, and I think that you can play the game and you can chase pricing, and you at some point you have to, once you check all of these other boxes, John, you have to go back and you have to sanity check, because part of that experience, it's not just one thing, not just being nice to people.
Yep.
My grandparents, they've both passed since this, but my grandparents used to love going to Vegas, and my grandfather would come back and talk about how nice everybody was to him. They'd open the doors for him, and they remembered his name. And then I went with him one time, and he was talking about all of his friends that he had made in Vegas, which, again, talk about illusion and part of an experience, right? They were doing their jobs. So to turn this thing on its head, though, when I went out there with him, it became abundantly clear. Oh, you tip everybody that you see. It's $20 to open up the door. I would remember your name too, Mr. Colston. I would
Yeah.
remember your children. I would remember where you're from. I would make a special mental note. And for the old man, it was always like, those people are just so nice. That's why I like going out there. There's the hook.
Yep.
So he was hooked at that point because his experience check boxes were all checked and all of those buckets were full. So at some point, and I'm sure there's another message in there, but like, well, yeah, money talks, right? So at some point, every business is going to have to go in and look at, okay, are our prices fair? Are they competitive? You can get along so far on that customer experience, but don't ever forget that part of that experience is at the end of the month when I'm paying my bills, that I experience a shortage in money because I had to pay Riviera Telephone Company too much for their services, for their goods. So I think everything has to factor in, but let's set all of that aside and let's do a controlled experiment and say, if my competition is going to provide at the same exact amount of money, internet service, phone service, what can I provide for them that some of those big market share players that run ads during the Super Bowl, what can they not do that I can do? There's plenty that they can do that I can't. I can't afford to buy a Super Bowl commercial. But what I can do is I can make every single one of those customers remember where they got that TV, that it worked, that they ran it for 2 years solid. They would tell me they go out and check it to make sure it still worked because they were just expecting this thing to fail. Create that experience for the customer, and it rippled all the way through my staff. And I still get to tell that story. And it's been, I would say, 5 to 6 years since that happened. And that's what makes you, like, if you're gonna die on a hill, die on the hill as a business owner, as a manager, die on the hill of we did everything that we could to serve those customers in the best way that we could.
And to be part of the fabric of the community you're in is another great way to do that.
Sure.
That your bigger competitors can't do. They can't be involved with sponsoring signage at the ball field or
Right.
donating maybe it's a gift basket for the raffle at the church, whatever it is.
Sure.
But to be part of the fabric of the community is a great way to ingratiate yourself with people. And all of this that we're talking about, I think we're talking about a really important time, Billy, because as people get more and more price sensitive during a recession.
Yes.
I was talking with a client of mine who was mentioning he's in he has rental properties. And he's talking about the price of a three-way PVC arm
Yeah.
piping, $21
Yep.
today. 2 years ago, it was $3.
Right.
So
And that's $21 if you can find them.
yes.
Yeah.
So people are becoming more and more price sensitive and
Yes.
are cutting things out of their budget. Nice to haves versus want to haves. And how you cement that loyalty is more and more important, for everyone. And it's the impression you leave, and it doesn't cost anything to say please, thank you, smile, remember people's names. And I think that it goes such a long way. I remember a bunch of years ago, and this ties in with the whole idea of the recession. And well, it depends on how you define a recession, apparently these days.
Right.
But what
Or how does the recession identify?
Yes.
Right.
So a bunch of years ago, we took a family vacation. My father-in-law and his wife, my family, and my brother-in-law and his family. Every couple of years, we take a family vacation somewhere. Well, we went to Greece a few years ago and spent a week in Marathon and Athens and a week on the island of Crete. And people ask me, or I hear someone say, "Oh, we'd love to go to Greece." I'm like, "Don't go.
Hmm.
Don't no. Go somewhere else. Find somewhere else to go." And they're like, "Why? It's beautiful there, and all the history." And I'm like, "It's not a great experience. Yeah, you get to
Yeah.
see, the Colosseum. You get to do a lot of sightseeing. However, like, they're the most surly, unfriendly people I've ever met anywhere. I'm not a world traveler, but I've been
Yeah.
around. I've been a lot of different places.
Huh.
And They wouldn't even they wouldn't even smile at you, and they were taking your money at the museum. They wouldn't even
Wow.
say thank you. They barely looked up. And
Wow.
I just remember we had a tour guide that was taking us around in a 15 passenger van. His name was Stavros. And my 8-year-old daughter at the time couldn't pronounce his name. She kept calling him Starburst. But so I was sitting in the front seat riding shotgun with him. And he's like, "Hey, John, what are your first impressions of Greece?" And this is week one in Athens and Marathon.
Right.
And I said, "Honestly?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, and this is coming from a New Englander. We're pretty conservative and introverted. We tend to
Right.
keep our head down and mind our own business up here, to a detriment that's
Sure.
become the stereotype that people in New England are not very friendly. You know,
Right. Yeah.
so like from someone who's accustomed to that, like this was that on steroids. And
Oh,
I
wow.
just said that to him, like people aren't very friendly. Do they hate tourists as much as Mainers hate? We call them mass holes. People that travel up from
Yeah.
Massachusetts and come up for a week or the weekend to visit Maine in the summer. Like,
Right.
do you guys hate tourists as much as people in Maine do? And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I shared that experience. Like, people don't look up and say hi when you pass them on the street. They're not friendly. Like I handed the guy at the museum money, to pay for our family's admission.
Yeah.
Didn't even look up or say thank you. And he's like, when the economy collapsed here, it sent virtually everyone really into a depression, like an emotional, like a
Oh, wow.
psychological depression,
Yeah.
and they've never recovered. And they're just, it's really kind of changed the, I don't know, the psyche or the persona of most of the citizens. He's like, I go back and forth between the U.S. and here. I'm not really your typical Greek citizen. I'm Greek. My family's here, but like I get it. I totally understand what you're saying. I see it too,
Huh.
and I warn them everywhere I go. Like, you keep doing this, and you're going to
Yep.
alienate the visitors, and they won't want to come here.
Interesting.
And like that's kind of the macro version of
For
what's
sure.
probably happening during a recession
Yep.
in a small town, with service providers, or if you sell a product, how are you showing up?
Yeah.
Are you smiling, saying thank you? Are you being friendly? Because people will have a story to tell. I can't tell you how many people I've told, don't, if you go to Greece, go to the island of Crete. They're actually friendly there.
Huh.
Athens Marathon, not at all. You know?
Wow. They're over it, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really salient point, John, is you can get locked in. There's other environmental concerns that go on. There's a recession right now, maybe. I don't know. I think the jury's still out on whether we're in a recession or not. I'll watch the news later and find out. So we get wrapped into our own stuff. It's kind of, everybody has things going on in their lives. The guys having problems with the wife at home. Don't drag that across the threshold.
Yep.
You got to leave. And does it kind of dehumanize the workforce to do that? Sure, maybe. And I'm compassionate, but here not too terribly long ago, I was talking to one of my managers that was, having a discussion about one of the staff members, and it reminded me of the scene in Fugitive with Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford, where he's like, "I didn't shoot my wife," and Tommy Lee Jones
That's
says,
my favorite scene. I talk about that scene
"I
all the
don't
time,
care," right?
right?
So, like,
He's just on a mission doing
that's
his
it.
job.
So stay focused on what your priorities are. My job is to bring this guy back in. I don't care if you shot your wife or killed your wife or strangled your wife. I don't care. So brilliant, so simple, and apparently one of those, like, that wasn't the line, he made it up, which makes it even
Totally
better,
ad lib that. Yep.
right? So that whole thing is all of that to say there's other environmentals out there. There's other stimuli out there that are going to impact staff members. There's other stimuli that, man, you ever walked into a customer's house that's having a bad day? If you've not been in the service industry, you can feel it.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do to change that experience for them, that day for them? Now, is that your responsibility? Absolutely not. But are you allowed as a service provider to let their attitude and their sourness get mirrored back at them? About the worst thing in the world that you can do, because all you're going to do is compound the problem.
Yep.
So I love that example of look, that's not my problem. I don't know what's going on with you. Here's what I'm here to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get to the finish line on this. And you may not like what I'm doing. This is the way I'm going to do it, and it's going to be at a top notch because
Absolutely.
I deserve that, and my business deserves that.
They don't call him His Royal Majesty for nothing, folks.
By God. So my wife and I did. There was one solid correction. I know you walked into my office and you made note of it. The little desk placard thing that
Yes,
usually
sir.
has your name on it. I actually
It usually has my name on it.
Yes, most places that I go, it says John Brubaker. You
Awesome.
not experience this? It's weird.
I'm not looking too carefully.
Your radar must not be up for that. But my wife got me one year for Christmas, and instead of saying Billy Colston, general manager, or something cute, it says Evil Overlord, and it was a complete ripoff of Megamind, the movie Megamind, right?
Yeah.
So it was like I thought that was funny. So that is the official title here, and I've got that one sitting on I'm the Evil Overlord of Riviera Telephone Company, and I love it because really and secretly I'm not that evil. So
he wears that like a badge of honor, folks. Awesome, Billy. This is a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear hear your report back, and we'll have you on again to get some other stories and just kind of discuss the evolution of things there. If someone wants to learn more about you guys, they maybe want to read up on the history, because this is a multi-generational family business, really, is what we're talking about. And those are my favorite businesses. Where can people find you? Or maybe they live in your area, they are in your coverage area, and they would like to get some service connected to their home.
The quickest and easiest way is to visit us on the interwebs at www.rivnet.com. That is our home landing page for our parent companies and our sister companies of Gulf Coast Broadband and Riviera Telephone Company.
Thank goodness Al Gore invented the internet.
I mean, every day that goes by, there's the rosary, and then I'd like thank you, Al Gore, for the internet, because that was a godsend.
Rivnet.com.
Rivnet.com.
I think this is a great place to wrap up, Billy. For people who, and I'd love to ask two questions at the end of an interview as we wind down. For people who want to maybe dip their toe in the water of becoming more of an experience company, what would be your best advice, best first step you would tell them to take?
Without hesitation, John, I would say, to whatever extent possible, try your best to put yourself in the shoes and the skin of your customer. How would you want to experience someone knocking at your door? And let's go back. Let's wind that back. If you have a service request, a service issue, do you want your technician to be punctual? Do you want your customer service representative on the phone to be pleasant? Do you want it short and sweet? Put yourself in those shoes, and don't be bashful with your customers.
Yep.
Go ask them. Don't be afraid of the survey, right? They, incentivize people. We're going to give you $5 credit. Do a survey. No, don't do a survey. Pick up the phone and call them. Actually physically reach out to hold on. No, let's not physically reach out to customers. That's going to be bad advice. Let's physically pick up a phone, but on a serious note, let's reach out to those customers. But step number one, get in the head of your customers and figure out what is the experience that I would want to have. What's my magic wand? What's my dreamscape look like? And that's a good launching pad of, if you can go through that checklist and say, am I doing everything that I would want to happen in my own experience? Then send the net out a little bit wider.
Awesome. Second question. I love to ask people, what did I forget to ask you or not ask you that you wished I would have? What's a question you wish I would have asked that I didn't? This is your opportunity to just shame me publicly.
Right, as really an incompetent interviewer and podcaster in general. so that like you
Yeah,
would
I feel
lose
like
your
the what was his name? Zach Galifianakis, the guy who did Between Two Ferns,
yeah.
just like the awkward interviewer. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, just
shame
I
me.
shame me. Um, man, I wish that I had been better prepared for that question because I really could have come up with something to make you crawl under your desk. Um, the only thing that would have given people a little better perspective is, like to talk about the climate in Riviera, the actual weather. And that to say, I'm joking. You hit really good points, and I don't think that we really missed anything for an overview of how do we want the experience to look. And again, that one point right there is everybody's experience has to be unique to their industry, has to be unique to their business. There's other people that run other internet service providing telephone companies that are going to have a completely different experience based on their clientele. Does your clientele really want that touchy feely thing, or do they want you to be curt to the point? Do they just want price point and reliable service? So I think if we wanted to dive into that lane, John, we could say allow your experience to be unique.
Yep.
And don't be afraid if if it looks different than what Riviera Telephone Company does, what Chin Up Chest Out does. Everybody's got to have their own. There it is, baby. Everybody's got to have their own experience, and it's got to be unique to you. There should be and could be some similarities, but I think that the similarities should be: are you putting in the effort that you need to put in to the experience for your customer?
Yeah, don't be a copycat. So many people say, "Oh, we want our people to have our customers to have a Ritz Carlton experience."
Right. Ritz Carlton already did that.
Yeah, exactly. So
The market
be
is
yourself.
cornered.
There's lots of ways to be a business. There's only one way to be yourself. Remember that.
That's it.
And regarding your climate question, fun fact: it was 49 degrees today in Riviera, Texas. It was 44 degrees in Portland, Maine. The thermometer should not look that similar ever.
They really shouldn't.
Between those two cities and states in November.
Right. Well, that's because of the recession, though.
And I was going to say Al Gore again. He predicted this. So there you have it. And there it is, folks. Go to rivnet.com. Check out what Billy Colston is doing there, creating an experience company, not just a telecommunications firm. And there is a big difference. Thanks for coming on, Billy. Can't wait to do this again with you.
Thank you so much, John. Have a good one.
My pleasure.